Welcome everybody to Next Level Snap. I am Peaceful here. Lamby is here with me as well. Lamby, I've gotten a lot of flack in the comments for always saying good morning when it is actually good evening for you. So good evening. How are you doing, man?
Good evening, man, and also good morning to you. It's fine. I'm doing great. It's been a while since the last one. I think we've both had different and busy schedules, but now we can finally get together to do this episode, which I think it's not gonna be deep. Okay, well, I guess it's a bit deep, but it's not gonna be long, and it's gonna be sadly not exactly about Marvel Snap, but in general, it's gonna be about like mental management, which I think is really important.
Absolutely, I agree. This is actually spawned from a post I had made on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, just talking about my personal experience. I'm a smaller content creator, and I put a lot of pressure on myself around results and getting to a certain level, and I was struggling with tilt, and it was something that came up, and it was just interesting to me because the way it impacted me was not something that I had ever really gone through before. I'm usually pretty good about like a game will mess with me a little bit. I'll get upset, but then I'm good about compartmentalizing and move on. And I was struggling with that because I wasn't getting the results I wanted, and it spawned a really nice conversation. I got a lot of responses from a lot of people expressing that they also struggle with the same thing. So I had some people reach out to me about wanting to see an episode of Next Level Snap about that to get Lammy's take on it and sort of what tips and things he uses to work through those sort of things. So that is what we're going to talk about today: is managing tilt and staying mentally level on ladder and tournaments, and how you do that. So real quickly before we get into that, I did want to go ahead and say, if you are not already following the channel or subscribed, you need to make sure you subscribe to Lammy's channel. He puts out a ton of great content. He has the Next Level Snap series here with me. He's got his series with KM Best. He's got a lot of good stuff. You're missing that really, really solid Next Level Snap content if you are not subscribed. No pun intended. So make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, and comment down below what you think about the topic, what other topics you'd like to see. We do check those, and we've gotten some pretty good ideas from those on some topics we're going to do. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to define really quickly for us basically what we're talking about here and what we're going to dive into. So, when we talk about tilt, that's basically the idea of becoming emotionally, distraught or upset by events in the game that have happened, whether they be something you did or something that was outside of your control, which, let's be honest, in a game like Marvel Snap happens a lot because of the RNG that is involved, and basically how that impacts your play and how emotions impact your ability to make sound decisions. That's the first big thing we're going to get into. And the other thing that I think is actually very important is avoiding being results oriented. And I want to kind of define what we mean by that. So on Next Level Snap, we spend a lot of time talking about, you know, basically, um, how to play correctly, what you should do, developing good habits. And the problem with those is that they work most of the time, but there are going to be times where something happens in a game where you play correctly, maybe you snap on two and you're playing correctly, you're sequencing your cards right, but the RNG of the game or how the game plays out, you end up losing, and that impacts you playing correctly the next game. Instead of you continuing to do those right things, those correct habits you've learned, you take the results of, well, I lost this game and then I lost the next game, and you start playing in a way that goes against what you know is the best way to play simply because you are impacted by the results that you experience personally in a very short period of time. And we're going to kind of dive into why it's important to avoid that and why it's important to avoid tilt. So let's go ahead and dive into that. Lammy, what steps do you use personally to help mitigate tilt during long sessions of play? I know you're a grinder. You play hours and hours and hours a day. What do you do to avoid tilt and not let tilt impact your play?
All right, so before we get into that, I just want to mention a little bit about like how tilt sets in. Like we talked about like what exactly it is, right? But I also want to talk a bit about like how it sets in. I think there's a lot of different factors that can affect yourself and make you go on tilt, which is there's a lot. But I think the main one to focus on that I want to highlight is about expectation management, because a lot of the time you tilt and you get upset because things don't go according to plan. It's really about things not going according to plan. And by not going according to plan, it means that you had a plan. So, and this having a plan is not really just having a plan. It's also about having a certain level of expectation of yourself or of your opponent. So, for example, a lot of the times, a lot of very good players, they tilt when they lose to a lesser experienced player. Why? Because they expect to win. They know they are better. Everyone knows they are better. But when they lose, for whatever reason, they get too absorbed in the fact that they lost, but they didn't realize or consider why the loss happened, and then they down spiral into this self-absorption of making it beating up on themselves, and then it down spirals and it makes your next few rounds in like a tournament or whatever unable to be. You can't focus, you can't play your best, and you just like scrub out of the tournament, for example. So a lot of it is about expectation management. So that's what I wanted to get out of the way. But what I do to mitigate like tilt from long play sessions, I think the first most important thing is prevention is better than cure. It's always that way. So being able to identify when you are about to tilt is more important. Well, it's actually the most important thing, because sometimes when you are in the tilt zone or whatever you want to call it, you can't dig yourself out fast enough because you're already experiencing all these complex emotions that you don't know you're experiencing, because your mind is messed up already. But to identify that you are about to tilt or about there, and stopping yourself from getting into too deep of a tilt state is very important. So I think for long ladder grinding sessions, you need to understand a few things, which is firstly, as much as you want to have a certain target or goal for your grinding session, like say I want like X amount of SP by the end of this session, you have to understand that like it's not always possible, because firstly, even no matter how good you are, a card game has variance, has RNG. You need to understand that like sometimes things don't just go your way, right? Like sometimes your opponents just all draw better than you. Sometimes you just draw the worst hands ever. It's not your fault. You don't control. You're not in control of these factors. So I think first thing to remember is don't let uncontrollable factors affect you too much. But when I say don't let, I mean like you need to know, just remind yourself that like certain things are not within your control. That is the most important thing. And secondly, also I feel like you need to set like a stop. Like this is like stocks, like a stop loss order, because at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that if you lose 100 SP in 1 hour, you can gain it back in the next 1 hour. Why? Because at the end of the day, Marvel Snap card games, strategy games, they're all a game of like mental resilience, right? So if you spend 1 hour and it didn't go well, your next 1 hour would be an attempt to cover it back, but minus 1 hour of concentration already. You've already spent 1 hour of brain power that cannot be immediately recovered out of nowhere. It's not humanly possible. So very likely, if let's say after 1, 2, 3 hours of play, you suddenly play worse, it's not like you are bad. It's just a natural human interaction with your brain whereby you just cannot focus as hard. Everybody's threshold is different. Obviously, I don't know what yours is. Mine is like, I don't know, maybe 3 hours on stream, for example. Then I start to play a bit like suboptimally. And then I know that like, all right, if I keep continuing here, I'm going to make like bad plays. I'm going to stay for 8 cubes when I know that I shouldn't. I'm going to like snap in the wrong spots. I'm going to like play cards in the wrong places. You know, this kind of things is like, you don't normally do this kind of things, but like it's because of mental fatigue and you don't even realize you are doing it like this way. So I think one hallmark way of like mitigating tilt during long sessions is you identify when you are making plays that don't make sense to you. Of course, this is more relevant to players that have experience playing the game. So a lot of these things that I'm saying, and it's also definitely more relevant to players that are very tryhardy at the game like myself. So once you start to notice you're making plays whereby you don't understand why you made this play. You would never make this play if you started playing. If you were playing 3 hours ago, you'll be like, oh, okay. It's not that I'm bad at the game. It's just that I think I'm starting to not be able to focus. And if you notice such things, it's better to just chill, take a break, do whatever,
Hmm.
do something else, or like just stop, because it's not like you will suddenly play better. Like, and I think one of the biggest things that happens, how should I put it, when people start to like play long hours and not get the results they want. Firstly, that's their expectation not achieved, like we mentioned at the start. So they start to like try. It's like changing a working solution, you know. Like if your solution is working the whole time, why would you want to suddenly change your deck after 3 hours just because you've been losing 3, 4 games in a row? Does that mean that your previous deck is bad? No, you spent 3 hours winning with it. But why after 3 hours you start losing with it? It's probably not based on your deck, but because you are so absorbed into this, like, oh no, I'm losing, I'm losing. I think my deck is not working. But literally 3 hours in a row you were doing well. Why would you want to change your deck? And the thing is, once you start changing your deck, you start to rush. You start to hope that things get better. And when you rush, you make even more suboptimal decisions. And then the whole down spiral happens, which I think at this point, a lot of people can relate to what I'm saying already. Because if you've played games like Hearthstone, you played like Marvel Snap, you grinded anything, you start to realize that like you start to agree with me also that like, hey, after like a few hours, I start to think of doing very like cringy and weird things that don't make sense. But I still try to do it because I thought I can change something. But actually, the only thing that needs changing is your brain. You just need to sleep. You just need to rest,
Mhm.
and then I think you can get back to your optimal like level. Yeah. So I think that was a bit long for me, but like in general, I feel like managing tilt and mitigating tilt is a lot about understanding when it starts and how to stop.
Yep. Dude, it's like, what is it? I think they call it the gambler's fallacy. You talked about that a lot.
Yes.
That's what I'm guilty of. It's like I lose an 8 cuber, and it's like immediately my brain's like, I need to get those 8. I need to get those points back.
Yes.
Like, how do I get those points? And like, that's not the way you should think. Every game is its own game. It's like just because you lost an 8 cuber doesn't mean you need to immediately win another 8 cuber or win 2 4 cubers in a row. That's just not how it works. And
Mm-hmm.
the law of averages states that over time everything's going to even out. So if you're playing correctly, if you're playing optimally, you lose an 8 cuber and it just needs to be like, oh well, that stinks. Yeah, like I would rather have won, but over time I know that's going to even back out because I'm playing correctly. I'm playing optimally. Over time, I will get those cube points back and I'll start going back up. But what happens is we all fall victim to it, and then you're forcing, and when you're forcing, you're no longer
Yes.
playing optimally. And that's the big thing that I struggle with, and I think it's a big thing that a lot of people struggle with. So, how much how we talked about it a little bit when we did our tournament episode. How much does compartmentalization impact this? Do you think? I know this isn't actually one of the questions I had on our list, but I just thought about it, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it because that's something that I've worked on a lot since we did that video. That's really helped me with tilt. And how much do you think that specific thing that we talked about in that video? I'll actually put a link to the tournament one in the description so people can check that out. But is that something that you think helps you when you're doing these long sessions and to fight tilt?
Right. So you're saying that how does a tournament setting affect like tilt management? Is that
Oh,
what you're asking?
the compartment. Like I was asking, how does when we were talking about tournament settings, we talked about compartmentalization, like being able to like kind of separate those things. Is that something that you think helps you with tilt when you're doing your long sessions of ladder grinding?
Yeah, so okay, so this is a good time to introduce one of my like trade secrets. It's not really a trade secret, it's like just the thing that I do since for the longest time since I was competing in like physical sports to Hearthstone to like Marvel Snap to like whatever I do right now, which is I feel like you need to be okay, so firstly, it's very easy to say you need to be focused, but the thing is you need to know what to focus on, right? So like in a tournament setting, you need to go like in Swiss, you need to go like maybe X1 or X2 in the tournament to how should I put it, to like get to the top cut and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But the thing is when you know such things, it's like the more you know, the worse it gets for you. So sometimes like being oblivious might be better. Like you know how sometimes people can just rock up to a tournament and just like, oh, I didn't practice, I just decided to casually
Yep.
go 8-0. You know that kind of thing. It's because
Yeah.
they don't know what's up. They don't know what they need to do. Okay, obviously this is not like what I'm trying to drive at, but the point is like a lot of players that are seasoned veterans, once in a while they crack because they lose like the early first round and then they'll be like, oh, I need to win 7 more to make top cut. They're not even focusing anymore on winning their next opponent, right? They are focusing on 7-0, 7 wins in a row. But the thing is, to even get 7 wins in a row, you need to play optimally 7 times, which means you need to play optimally the second round, you need to play optimally the third round. So you have to channel your focus to the right thing. So I feel like tilt and like mental and stress and tournament stress, it's all very linked because a lot of people can like try to do a lot of things, but the simplicity of it all is just that when you have a task, you focus on the one task first. And then once you finish the one task, then you can think like, okay, then I need to do the next task, then the next task. And if it all goes well, you will hit like the final goal. But I think one thing that a lot of players and tournament players don't realize is that their tilt and their emotional instability comes from the fact that they see too much of the big picture
Hmm.
when they don't realize that the small picture needs to be accomplished before the big picture can even be in the scene. Like it's hard to should I put it, do it, but it's all about constantly, it's like practice. Like, because I learned this the hard way through my own experiences. You really need to tell yourself that, like, no matter what the situation is, you know your end goal, but to reach the end goal, especially in a tournament whereby mental resilience is key because any more mistakes and you are definitely not gonna get there. You need to focus on like doing what you can do for the now, which stems back to earlier we mentioned about the don't worry too much about factors you cannot control, right? Like don't worry about in tournaments. People always worry about this thing. They'll be like, oh, I don't want to match up against this deck because I cannot beat that deck. I don't want to match up against this opponent because I cannot beat that opponent. I don't know if I can have the mental strength to play 7 rounds, that kind of thing. The thing is, all these things are not within your control, right? It's all eventualities that could be your end state. But your end state that you want is to go 7-0 after losing round 1. So in order to even reach that end state, you need to focus on what is in front of your face right now, which is your round 2 opponent and then your round 3 opponent. So I think compartmentalization like that in your thought process is super important because like I love seeing the big picture and like thinking of things like in a broad spectrum. But to achieve these, you need to shrink it and look at what's in front of you right now. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, like, that applies to so many things in life too. It's like it's kind of like in like a good example for people maybe trying having a hard time picturing it is like if you say have a like a big report due for work something it's like a 500-page report. Like you can't worry about how you're going to get it done. You have to worry about like, well, this is the first section I need to get that done. This is the second. Like if you aren't breaking it down and like focusing on the now and what you actually need to get done at this point, the quality of what you're doing in that moment is always going to go down. You have to be focused on what you need to be doing in that moment, and that's what Lamby's talking about here. I think it's great advice, not just in Snap, but in basically any game or anything you do in life. You got to be able to compartmentalize, break it down, and focus on the important things that you need to get done now.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
especially when it comes to competitive related things. Because when it comes to related things, when you are competing in something, it's very evident that you care about it. You want to do well. You have a goal, right? But the thing is, when it comes to goals and like high stressful situations, there is always, like we mentioned earlier, the expectation management part, which is like you know what you want to achieve, but you actually need to focus on what can be done first, not just on the overarching goal, which is like, oh, I need to get that, I need to get that. It's like, I'm just gonna use like, because I think when this video is out, it will be over already. But like, I would have participated in the Conquerors event for Marvel Snap, and a lot of people have voted for me and said like, oh, Lamby, I put my hope on you to win the variant, blah blah blah, things like that. So I think one thing that I personally will be doing for this tournament setting of sorts is that one thing that I've been doing for every tournament setting, including the one where I won this, I was like literally doing the same thing, which was I told myself that, okay, I prepare. I'm technically a little bit favored for this kind of event, but I'm also allowed to lose. I think the most important thing is you need to keep reminding yourself that it's you do your due diligence, you know what you should be doing, but at the end of the day, you are allowed to lose. Like, doesn't mean losing here means you are bad, right? It's just sometimes it's just not meant to be. And if it's not meant to be, it doesn't mean you are not meant to be. It's just not the right time, you know? So, like, I will obviously do my best. And hopefully, when the time this video is out, I may have won you guys the Devlog variant. But if I didn't, all I know is that I can tell you guys that I always allow myself to lose so that I don't go on this, like, amazing tilt streak. And for the last few years, it has worked out. I haven't really gone on any, like, crazy bad streaks before because I always remember that, like, no matter what happens, no matter how good you are a human. You are allowed to make mistakes. You are allowed, you're allowed breathing room. You're allowed to breathe. That's the
Mhm.
point. You're not just because people have expectations for you doesn't mean that you cannot disappoint. Not saying you will, but you are allowed to. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. And again, we're this video is on a Marvel Snap channel. We're talking about a game with a ton of RNG between draw RNG, between location RNG, between, all these random things that can happen in a game that are out of your control. Like it's important to remember that it's not always you. That's something that I think is very human and that is a huge part of tilt that you lose and you're like, well, what did I do wrong? Like, why am I so bad? Like there's all these thoughts that start going through your head are like, why didn't I do better? Why didn't I do this? And then sometimes there's just things you can't play around, and sometimes there's your opponent just makes a really good read and they just outplayed you in that moment. That doesn't mean they're even a better player. That just means they made a really good play in that moment. And it's very easy to get yourself very down or very upset, or maybe your opponent makes a very bad play, but it happens to beat the play you made.
Yes.
And that's again, that doesn't mean what you did was wrong or that you should beat yourself up. In fact, the opposite. You should look at it and be like, well, what they did made no sense, and I was never going to play around that. So what I did was correct. Yes, I lost, but that's okay. And that's something that I've worked really hard on in the last, probably 3 or 4 months as I've tried to improve on my tilt is being able to look at a situation and know what caused that, instead of like immediately assuming I did something wrong or being upset that I lost a game that I didn't think I should lose. I try and look at it and be like, okay, well, how could I have changed this? Was there something I should have done different? And if not, then I can just move on and know that as long as I keep using that process, I'm going to be okay, and I'm going to win more games than I lose in that situation. So I think that's an important part of that, of what we're talking about here as well. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the last topic of the day. We're going to talk about being results oriented and how to avoid letting that affect your decision making. So again, just a brief recap on what we're talking about here. You're following methods, you're doing things the right way. You lose a game, and then you lose a game because of the methods that you're doing. And results oriented is looking at that and saying, well, I need to change what I'm doing, instead of looking at the overall picture. Why is this a dangerous thing to do, and how do you avoid letting that affect your decision making?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because I indirectly covered a little bit of this earlier as well with the whole like swapping of decks thing, but I think we can go deeper into it, which is that I think results oriented thinking is very, very dangerous because a lot of it is it's very weird, right? They call it results oriented, but like at the same time, it's also very illogical because like I'm gonna cite the same example again for the deck changing one. Like if you've been doing something correctly for the last 3 hours and it's working, but maybe in the last 20 minutes you just lost like 5 or 6 games in a row, and you're like, oh, my deck doesn't work anymore. But nothing changed. The only thing that changed was mental fatigue, right? But the meta didn't change, your opponents didn't change. Basically nothing changed except the fact that you got a bit more mentally fatigued. But because you got a bit more mentally fatigued and you saw that you are losing, you couldn't make the rational decision to just stick to it or take a break. So you made the slightly more irrational decision by saying, "Oh, my deck lost, so I need to change deck. New deck equals win." That kind of thing. That's the thing that goes into your mind. And the thing is, like, you're already mentally fatigued. You swap to a deck that you have less practice on, or like maybe might be not the right call, which is why you didn't choose it in the first place. But because you were mentally fatigued and you thought that you need to change a deck to change, like, you need to change a variable that didn't need changing. So you change the variable and it screws up your whole experiment. Like in like when there's like too many variables, things just go messy and crazy. So then you start introducing more variables, like you say like, oh, I need to change this card from the deck that I never wanted to play to begin with, and this will work. But all this is all based on the fact that you are just more mentally fatigued. So I think because we covered a lot of this at the start already, I just want to add one more thing which I wanted to talk about earlier, but I think now is a good time to talk about it, which is so I have this thing, and I think this is one of the more important things which you can actually try to put into practice, which is I always believe that to maintain your sense of self, to maintain your like ability to stay in control of your emotions and your ability to play properly, right? Firstly, we mentioned in the first topic, you need to identify when you're about to tilt. And once you identify this, right, you need to do a thing. So when I say thing, I always use this example, which is the Inception example. Inception is a movie from a while back whereby reality and dreams are like they're like mixed up, but that's not the point. The point is the main character has this thing. It's called like a totem. It's just an item which he always spins to remind himself that like he's still in control of reality. So what I always talk about when it comes to managing tilt is that when you are about to tilt and you realize something is going wrong, have a thing that you can do. I don't know what that thing is. I don't really need to know yours. I'm not going to tell you mine. But like, there's a thing that you should be doing at all times to tell yourself that, all right, I'm still in control of my emotions. Be it just literally drinking water, going for a walk, walking your dog, something. Like, find something that when you do it, you take a deep breath, you feel like, all right, I'm still here. I can play. If not, take a break. Yeah. So my point is always have a thing that you can do in stressful situations. Like this same thing that you can always do in stressful situations to remind yourself that, all right, I'm still here. I'm still chill. And if it doesn't work, that means stop. Like you know that there's this process that you can go to try and maintain control. But if you can't or whatever, you know that it's probably time to just chill. So TLDR, I think this is one mental tip that I've been using for a very long time, which is whatever you do, whatever you can, whatever it is, find your thing, your totem, find your whatever that lets you remain in control of your emotions. It's a very personal thing, and it's helped me a lot through many different competitions, live, online, work, or like other problems that I have yet to solve. And it's very relevant to like competing in games because it's a very high pressure, high mental energy like thing. So as long as you have something that allows you to keep your everything together in tight and tough moments, find your thing. And I think it will be very helpful for most people because it's been very helpful for me.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people have something like this and don't even realize it, and it's important that
Yes.
you understand what that's doing for you. Like for me, it's always been like a breathing thing that I do. It's one of those things I was like very into like the science of like how to be healthier and all that stuff for a while. And one of the things I learned is that the best way to like to calm yourself when you're upset is by breathing out longer than you breathe in. It's like a mental thing because when you're it's again, it's scientific. It's not something we need to get into in this video, but like
Yeah.
breathing in for 3 seconds, breathing out for five calms your body. It tells yourself that you're in a safe state and that you don't need to be worried. And there is this scientific thing that I did want to bring up. It's called the fight or flight reflex that we as humans have because when we were living in caves and scared of getting eaten by a bear, you needed to have the fight or flight reflex because if something attacked you, you needed to immediately be able to go into that adrenaline kick and start protecting yourself. But the problem with the fight or flight reflex is it shuts off creative thinking, it shuts off your ability to analyze and think. And your fight or flight reflex is activated when you get upset, which is what tilt is, right? So, understanding that scientifically, when I get tilted, I'm no longer thinking clearly helps me more than anything else because I will immediately think of that. That's kind of my totem. It's not a physical thing, but it's a mental thing
Yeah.
where I'm like, oh, I'm in fight or flight right now, and that immediately helps me start. I start breathing slower. I start concentrating. I start focusing, and that helps me calm down because understanding that when you are in tilt and you are letting yourself get emotionally upset, you are no longer going to be able to play optimally is like the simplest thing. I think we all understand that like on a basic level, but when you really break it down and understand the science of it, it makes it a lot easier to detach yourself from that and to let that up like those emotions go and settle yourself back down.
Yeah, so this is very interesting because like we talked about these kind of things, right? But like the core of it is that like I'm not and I'm like not like trained to like keep myself calm or like keep anyone calm. Like this is not something that I trained or like certify myself to do. It's more like I just learned this the hard way over time. Like, I'm telling you this with a very straight face and very chill attitude, right? But like I went through so many different variations of tilting, not sure why I'm tilting, not sure how to manage tilt. Like, and then I came to this very simple conclusion. I don't know how and when, but it just all set in one day whereby I was like, all right, so now I can do this thing for myself, whatever the thing is. And like I remind myself that like all the little things we talk about, right? Expectation management, like allowing yourself to lose, and then you do your own, like whether it's breathing or walking the dog or like going for a walk or drinking water or whatever it is, do your thing. And then like it's actually very simple. It's like it's just finding a method to calm yourself down. And whatever that method is for you, I hope you find it. And like you'll be surprised how this completely non-card game like thing actually just lets you like play better at card games. Like of course you have to be like decently proficient at the game for all these kind of things to matter anyway. That's also like the baseline. But like outside of the baseline, all these little mental tips, right? Like you'll be very surprised how much it just changes your next game. You feel more in control. You feel more like you know what's up. And I think these little things, if anything, even if one little tidbit from this video just helps you in your next game, right? It's a success. You improved. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's wrap it up. This it was so funny. We both were talking before the video started. We were like, "Oh, this is going to be a shorter one." We're up to almost a half an hour already. But this is a good topic, and I think it's something that is going to be relatable for a lot of people watching. So I think everything we've covered has been really important. But let's go ahead and wrap it up. Let's kind of summarize. So if there was two or three points from this video that you think people should be able to take home, if you're one of those people that doesn't like watching a whole video, if someone just skipped to the end here, what points would you want them to take away from this video?
All right, so gonna give you a scenario very simple, and you have a big competition coming up in half an hour. You have no idea why you stumbled upon this video, but you did. So if you are at this point, which we will put like a click, so you can click straight to this point. Few things that you should know if you are in a position whereby you might tilt later or are about to tilt. Right, first thing to know, you are allowed to lose. All right, especially if you are a good player. This tends to happen more to good players. If you're a very good player and you suddenly feel like you're about to tilt, just remember that you're allowed to lose. You are still good even if you tilt. It's just that I mean you're still good even if you lose. It's just that sometimes in card games you just don't draw well. Your opponent draws better. Things it's just not your day. You're allowed to lose. That doesn't mean you're bad. You're still good. Secondly, which is linked to the first topic, which is expectation management, right? That doesn't mean that like if you've done all the prep or whatever, like if you've done the due diligence already, sometimes things don't just go your way. I feel like at the end of the day, because of variance in card games and stuff like that, you need to know that like sometimes the result is not something you can control. Just do the steps that could lead you to that result. That's your due diligence. And if you don't get there, then there's always the next tournament. And I think the one thing that we talked about near the end of the video that was super important is uh, identifying when you're about to tilt. And if you can see that it's about to happen, do your thing. The thing whereby that it keeps you in control, whatever that thing might be, find it for yourself. Keep yourself in control. Know that like if you do this thing, it theoretically should help you calm down and help you maintain your awareness that you're about to tilt and you don't want to reach that too late point. So find your thing for yourself, do it, and hopefully it helps you keep calm and keep going forward.
Absolutely. All great points. If you are struggling with tilt, just know you are not alone. That's another thing I think a lot of people need to remember. So, thank you all so much for watching. Again, if you have not hit that subscribe button, what are you doing? This is great content. Lamby's got a lot of good stuff on his channel. His series with KM Best is one of my favorites. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss any of that killer content that's coming out. We will catch you next time. Lamby, thank you so much as always.
You guys.
All right, and see you guys later. Bye, everybody.